Welcome to Matthew 14. So this one's going to be a shorter one. It's going to be this section and these two. All right, let's get into it. The death of John the Baptist. At the death of John the Baptist. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus, and he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead. This is why these miraculous powers are at work in him." For Herod had seized John and bound him, and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother's Philip's wife, because John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." And though he wanted to put him to death, he feared the people, because they held him to be a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company and pleased Herod, so that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she might ask. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter." And the king was sorry because of his oaths, and the guest he commanded it to be given. He sent and had John beheaded in the prison, and his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother. And his disciples came and took the body and buried it, and they went and told Jesus. So, some notes. One, this is where head on a silver platter comes from. People believe Jesus was John, raised from the dead. Herod's nephew danced for him, and he gave her a gift in return. Now, during this time, the Roman Empire were very gross people. So a lot of weird stuff happened, such as a nephew dancing for her uncle. So, and just a last note, John's disciples buried John's body for him. Jesus feeds the 5,000. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew himself there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and had compassion on them, and healed the sick. Now, when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is over now. Send the crowds away to go to the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." And then he ordered the crowd to sit down in the grass and take 5 loaves. And taking 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of, and those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So Jesus withdrew when he heard the news of the death of John, and people followed him. The crowds followed him, and Jesus fed them, and he had 12 baskets left over. Just pointing that out. All right. Jesus walks on water. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he dismissed the crowds, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was long away from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the 4th watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost." They cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come and to get..." Sorry. And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink. And he cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." So there's going to be a bunch of notes for this. Jesus sent the disciples away, and he decided to pray on it alone with themselves. And while they were sent away, they finally were very far from land, and Jesus walked out on them on the water. And he came to them when the waters were very rough. Now, verse 30, and when he saw the winds, he was afraid, and he began to sink. So, when Peter saw that the waves were tough and the wind was blowing crazy on him, he lost his focus on God, and he started to sink in the water. Now he cried out to Jesus, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him. And Jesus ended up chastising him because he was like, "You see me walking, you were just walking on the water. Why did you lose your attention?" All right, the last section. Jesus heals the sick in Gennesaret. And when they crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of the place that recognized him, they sent around to all that region and brought to him all who were sick, and imploring him that they might only touch the fringe of his garment, as many as touched it were well. So after they were on the boat, they got to this town, and the people they recognized Jesus, and they believed that even if they touched just the tiny bit of his garment, that they would be healed. So that's similar to Matthew 9:21, which we read, which I'm going to pull it up, about the woman who had been bleeding. I'm going to read it right now. For she said to herself, "If I only touch his garment, I will be made well." That is just a similarity. Their faith has shown greatly. All right, so that's all for today. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe, and goodbye.